the cameras, when we first started doing this, were just getting to the point of, being low grade film and being lightweight and affordable. And yeah, we really can just have a small band of people and go out and make a film that shows on the same screens that all the other ones do.
Hi, this is Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdoc Online. We have been covering over the last 6 years, 150 different episodes of documentaries. And so I ask you, what if you knew that there were 5 teenagers about to take off in a van across country? It sounds like an interesting documentary, doesn't it? But in fact, as we'll find out today, this is the first episode where we're actually doing I was going to say scripted film, but we're going to find out how scripted this film really is and how documentary it is or is not when we meet the Ross brothers, Bill and Turner Ross. But before we begin, I want to remind you that we're brought to you in part by Real Screen Magazine, Real Screen Summit, Real Screen West. Go to our Westdoc, scroll down to the bottom, click on the icon for Real Screen, and find out the latest details. So now let's say hello to Bill Ross and Turner Ross, the Ross brothers. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, Chuck.
Doing good.
Bill, where are you located? Where are you speaking from?
I'm in Eagle Pass, Texas today.
And Turner, you are
I'm at my home in New Orleans today.
New Orleans.
Very happy to be so.
Your film is really unique in many ways. It looks, feels, smells, sounds like a documentary. But in fact, of course, it's not a documentary. It's and I'm going to put in quotes, scripted film. And so the question is, how did this film come about? And what was the process in making this film?
Well, our last film had just come out, Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. We had premiered it, and then a month or two later, the world shut down. We were sitting on our couches, texting back and forth, and one of the conversations was, who does this suck for the most? And we arrived at, being a teen stuck inside at that point must have been awful. We thought about our experiences, like wanting to leave the small town that we grew up in, and then having that compounded with just not being able to move at all. So that's what launched the conversation that, over months and months led to the idea for the film.
Let's take a look at the trailer.
Are you guys sure you want to do this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I see him.
Jump in now. Let me ask Nicole.
I like the van. It's pretty cool. Are you just looking for cool sights and stuff?
Kinda, yeah.
Whoa, look at the fucking color of the sky over there. It looks like a Bob Ross painting, bro. Bob Ross was 7'3", man. You're fucking lying. No, he's not that tall.
They're gonna have a party at this place called the End of the World at some beach or something.
It might be fun.
I guess going? Let's fucking do it.
As soon as we hit that highway, boom, felt like my new beginning was coming.
Where the fuck are we at?
What are y'all doing here?
We're trying to go to the beach.
Heading for the coast.
If you guys are for real about the train, we could try.
You'll always meet different people anywhere and everywhere,
Bring it in.
I've never cried at a landscape school.
This is the big difference between grown-ups and children. Grown-ups aren't supervised. You gotta find your own way.
That's a pretty good trailer, yeah.
Actually, it's a very good trailer, I would say.
Thank you.
Quite a good
Thanks.
trailer. Um, so you've got 5 kids going on a road trip. How did you, what was the pre-production process for this film, casting and script? How did that come about?
Well, it's many things. It actually started with location. We were really fascinated by the distinct region that is the Northwest, from having spent time up there together, from hitchhiking and hopping trains through there. You know, we listened to music from there in the 90s, and some of our favorite films were shot up that way. So it's also kind of it's also very much a mythic space in the story of America. Those all of those things were undercurrent to investing in the region. We started going up really as soon as we could travel during COVID, and we would rent a car. We weren't able to talk to anybody or go in any place, but we drove around Washington and Oregon rather endlessly, scouting locations, trying to figure out routes, trying to imagine a peopled landscape there in a time where it wasn't. And that led to conversations about story. And like Bill said, to thinking about, you know, who probably didn't have it too good during that time. It caused us to reflect on our youth and really wanting to get out of our town, and just remembering the energy that was sort of loaded and ready to shoot out into the world in that moment in our lives. So we had a broad idea of the we had a broad idea of the narrative, of sort of the superstructure of how they would move through space, of different encounters they might have, but sort of an ever-growing idea of who the kids were, how many they were, how they found each other, if they found each other, if they took off together. Because as we write, we're also casting, and the casting informs the writing, and vice versa. Our friends Jesse and Lauren had a casting company down here in New Orleans. It was a very difficult time to cast during COVID, and they remained on the ground up there, street casting, sending in tapes and interviews and auditions. And slowly through that process, we peopled the film. And it wasn't really until much later in it that we found the kids. So we headed into production with a very set schedule. We shot every day for 6 weeks, for 6 days of screen time. And it was impractical and ridiculous to try to pull off, and it probably shouldn't have worked. But it did.
Before I forget, because it's not on my list of credits, it looks really good. What did you shoot on? I like the tech geek camera people like to know what cameras, and I'm curious.
Mostly Sony FS7s. For the night stuff, we did FX3, and we encouraged everybody that we had our 5 leads in front of the camera, and we had 7 crew behind. And we encouraged, because we were all, yes, we were making a movie, but we were all on a trip. We encouraged everybody to document it as well. So that means cell phone footage ends up in the film, and disposable camera stills end up in the film.
I think everybody on the film has a shooting credit somewhere in there.
Yeah. That's true.
How did you mic the 5 principals and other people that weren't principals?
As best we could.
Yeah. It was, I mean, even though, it's, it is set up and it's scripted, it is still very, very run and gun. So there's, the kids are talking to somebody. You don't want to interrupt that by being like, well, hold on, let me get a mic on you. We don't ever do that. But
it was mostly, lavalier mics, shotgun mics, planted mics in different scenarios. It was all very fluid. These aren't film sets. So while it was composed and we had a very strong sense of what we were doing. It never felt like a film set. There was no action and cut. We created scenarios and then let them breathe. So we kind of had to adjust as we went.
Was there a sound man with a boom, overhead and a shotgun mic, or was it?
There is a credit in the
we never
film.
do.
There's a credit in the film for Mr. Everything, Tom McGovern, and he was very much that. In the end, he was also our assistant editor. During production, he was everything: our driver, our grip man, our sound man, one of the shooters. He did an incredible job. It was a crew of only 7 people, so we all had to wear a lot of hats.
How much video did you shoot in an average day, would you say, roughly?
It would depend. I mean, most days were, probably 12 hours on average. But after our first film, we calculated that we had 500 hours worth of footage, and after that, we stopped asking that question because it becomes too daunting to know that you have to go through all that.
It was less than that, though. Bizarrely, it was less than that. 6 straight weeks of shooting, most days, all day. It was manageable.
And you guys are credited as not only the directors, but as the editors and cinematographers, also the principals, right? So, and
That is correct.
what did you cut on? Just curious, what NLE did you use?
We were on Premiere.
And with that number of hours of footage and that sort of unscripted, Premiere held up and was fine. And were you in different locations, or were you in the same office cutting together, or separately?
Over the course of a year and a half, it varied.
A lot of times we were in the same room. We even had
tried to
uniforms.
be in the same room as much as we could. But no, Premiere held up great throughout all that, if I remember correctly.
And did you, when you got to the fine cut, rough cut stage, were you previewing the film for any outside people or audiences and taking tests and seeing what's working, what's not working, and so on? Or, I mean, what was the process then?
Always.
Yeah, we always do. And when we got to the point where we thought it was, watchable and that we were happy with it, we have a trusted circle that we sent it out to, and as is the case with every film, they all wrote back saying how bad it was and that they were worried that it was never going to work. And
it's a torturous process.
Yeah, so you go into a week-long depression and question if you were ever talented to begin with and why you ever thought.
But otherwise, we end up with our heads too far up our own asses. It's like we love the thing that we do, but we may not be articulating it well, and so we've always set ourselves up for critique and criticism. It's been a part of our process always.
Yeah, you need
and
that.
We learn so much from it, But also, we have a very strong guiding light. You have to understand how to take criticism and notes, because everybody's got ideas. But
when you ask somebody for ideas, they're going to give you ideas.
Yeah,
you have to know how to filter those.
Yeah.
How does it work having 2 directors on a movie shoot? I mean, obviously, you guys are almost finishing each other's sentences in some ways, or interrupting, or cutting off, or just as a put this in context. I'm a director also, been in the Directors Guild for 40 years. And rule number 1 at the Directors Guild, with a couple of obvious notable exceptions beside the 2 of you, but the rule number 1 is there's 1 director on the set, 1 voice.
Mm-hmm.
Except the Coen brothers and a few others, right? The Ross brothers. But so how does that work?
Well, we don't have sets.
Well, you do have sets, because if you're on a street corner, that's your set, right?
No, absolutely.
Right.
We work well together. We've been doing it our entire lives. This is a symbiotic relationship in which we deeply trust each other and make sure that we both have each other's best interest in mind and the best interest of the project. We have a shared vision for something, and
And there's so much planning. We plan so much ahead of time so that when we do start shooting, we can just let it go, and it does become like shooting a documentary. So we know the film uh, inside and out, so that when if somebody were to come up to me, I probably have the exact same answer that Turner would give them if they went up to him. So
and we kind of have to, because we also, we're both shooting, this is a dance that we're doing together. We both have to know exactly what's going on. Like Bill said, both need to be able to respond to anything, and then also never drop the ball. I mean, we're producing, directing, inevitably editing. We've written. Uh, it's much better to have the two of us there and make sure that we're getting through it than to just have one of us. It also keeps, I think, it also keeps the voice really honest. There's no runaway authorial voice, or there's no dictator there. We have to figure it out together between the two of us, and then as well with everybody that we're working with. So I think it helps set a good precedent uh, when we're working with others.
Well, is it, and again, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, but is it a bit confusing for some of the actors ever to know, who do I go to ask, should I do this or that?
I don't think so. I think we make it very clear. I'm taking this film as an example. We ahead of time we basically had like a camp orientation before we ever got in the van, and like they had packets, and we went through absolutely everything we could ahead of time, and they always knew that we were the safety net and that they could come to us with anything, whether it was film related or personal. We were there to support them and take care of them throughout the whole thing. So
And we're rarely going to contradict each other. So in terms of the work, so it really comes down to who's the best person to answer the question, and we're interacting also as individuals. I mean, Bill and I are separate people with different skill sets and different emotional capabilities. So I think it depends on the question.
I mean, it's funny because I asked you earlier before we started, Turner, what was your age difference? And you're just under 2 years, right? Which is exactly the same as my brother and I. And I mean, I love my brother and he's wonderful, but I think his skill sets are totally different than mine. And he's way more talented in some areas than me, and vice versa, right? But
yeah, same here.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's beautiful, because then we can complement each other.
I noticed in the credits that you mixed the film in the audio mix in Mexico.
Absolutely.
And you chose to mix in Mexico with a mixer that didn't speak English because why?
No, they can speak English.
Oh, they did.
They had excellent command of the English language.
Oh, I thought that I'd read in the notes that there was the language issue there.
That'd be real interesting.
Yeah, that would be. No. My wife is a filmmaker, and she was mixing her film down there, and I was sitting in the back of the stage editing this, and I was just noticing how they were getting along, and I really over the course of a few weeks, like really enjoyed their company and just how they were approaching the work with her. And the sound mixer we usually work with was on another film, and so we were looking to collaborate with somebody new, and it also was very beneficial because our sort of shorthand, our shortcuts as Americans, they didn't have, and so they brought a fresh eyes to the whole thing that pushed us and made us reconsider things that maybe we take for granted. Like, why is that funny? Why does this sound? Why is that associated with this? And so pushed us, which is what, we want in every collaboration, to question why we're doing something, to, if you're going to stand on a decision, it's like, why? So it was, they're extremely hilarious people. So it was very fun to hang out, and we would go out every night after work. And yeah, Hassan Studios in Mexico City for anybody who's looking.
Were all the kids 18 or over? And
Yeah.
and were there issues with parents, even though they're 18? There still must be probably some of them living at home or worried and concerned. And was everybody on the cell phone to their home if they had to be or not? What was the protocol there?
It's a different story for each kid. Yeah.
It's a different story for each kid. But yeah, like at our camp orientation that we had before the trip, we were meeting with parents and setting the expectation for, exactly what we were up to. We did not want to have issues in that department. So we were very clear on what we were going to get into as much as we could. We obviously didn't know, but
because while they did legally have their autonomy, we also want to be coming from a place of positivity and understanding. But then again, some of these kids didn't really have much of a home life, so it was case by case.
In the film, there are a bunch of scenes where they run into people on the street and they hop on the train and so on and so forth. How did you deal with? I assume you met a lot of people on the street, which ended up in the film. And so at what point did you go up to them and say, oh, by the way, we're making a feature film here and sign this 27-page contract? Or how did you deal with people that you didn't expect to be there?
I think this is where some of the evolution of the process comes in. I think that happened less than you might think. A lot of these locations, we had relationships with people there in advance. Even if they were populated by other folks in that moment, the core group knew what was going on, could exchange that information. Everybody signed off on these things, but we went through such an extensive casting process and also meeting so many people along the way in scouting that a lot of them were incorporated into the film. So, in any one location, there might be a lot of people from that area who had come to audition or interview who needed a space. And we found spaces for most of them. And then in areas like Portland, the madness of the streets is going to occur. But the core group is already sort of doing its own thing, moving through it. I don't think we encountered any major obstacles in that, but got a little hairy at times.
So, like, there's a scene, I think, around before they get on the train with a couple of heavily pierced woman. Were they pre-cast before you got there? So they were.
Yeah. All those characters, all the characters who are the stepping stones to their journey are people who were cast and complicit in this. The train riders, they are themselves. They hopped a train into the location to come shoot the scene, but they're there intentionally.
I always ask the filmmakers, what's the budget of the film? Can you give me a rough idea of what the budget was and what does it include or not include?
I think all in, we came in just under $1 million, which is pretty great considering everything that we pulled off. And that leads us to the present moment. We had the early support of XTR, who also was one of the co-financiers and production entities for Bloody Nose. And then as we were going into production, Mubi came on board and financed the majority of the film. And we continue to work with them through distribution. The film comes out here over the next few weeks, and they've just been incredible to work with. They kept their distance when we needed it, and they've been very present and attentive when we needed that. it's been a really good experience for us.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up Mubi because even though I've kind of heard of them in the background, I really didn't know about them. I went on their website today. They have a collection of really fabulous films, some of the classic films of all time, including Francis, The Godfather, and they've got Wim Wenders, and they've got Apocalypse Now, and 100 other films that and then some independents that you might not know as well.
It's an incredible platform, extremely well curated, very accessible. I think that's a common story. A lot of folks stateside hadn't been familiar, but hopefully this raises some awareness there because it's a very cool situation they've got.
And do they have offices here? Are they based in the UK? Where is their home base? Do you know, or what is the story?
Yeah, I think they had been more established previously in the UK, Europe, South America, and Mexico, and have really are really making a push to expand here stateside and globally. So I think that profile is rising at the moment.
So in a much smaller way, they're kind of like Netflix, basically, right? They're producing some films or helping to find
extremely well curated Netflix, and not just funding content. I think they're being very selective about what they're doing, and we were very honored to have them support what we're doing.
What are you guys working on now or the future? What's up next?
New ideas all swimming around upstairs.
We don't know yet. I mean, I think we'd probably do know, but
it's coming.
I don't think we can articulate it yet. But it's starting to. It's very blurry, and it'll make sense in the future. But at the moment, I don't know.
It's good, and I'm excited about it and scared about it. But at the moment, we also need to be present to to usher this thing out into the world. We love this thing that we made, and want to give it a good life before we move on.
I mean, what's so interesting to me about this is, when I look back at some of your film history, Bloody Nose and Empty Pockets is similar in except that it was in one location, right? In that it was not scripted, but it felt like, looks like, tastes like a documentary, right? Except that it wasn't. And yet, neither of you really have extensive documentary experience, but you're creating almost a new genre here, right?
I don't think it's new. I think documentary people are now being more honest about how those things are made. I mean, what we're doing, people have been doing since the beginning of filmmaking, but haven't been quite upfront about what tricks they're employing to get the material that they're
It's a matter of classification, and the real dividing line being journalistic ethics. Bill and I are having prolonged creative conversations together. And when we have an idea, we figure out the best way to execute it. And for us, that has involved what are more traditionally, practices of nonfiction, but they are composed. And I mean, we have to get at these ideas by whatever means are at hand. And this is the mode in which we're operating.
How much involvement are you going to have in terms of the release theatrically and online and that sort of thing? Do you know yet what's coming up for you?
Yeah, we'll be. Go ahead, T.
Well, we're doing a lot of press.
But we'll be at a lot of the openings. We'll be in New York May 10th. We'll be in Los Angeles May 17th. And
some of the cast will be with us on the West Coast.
What's happened now? From the notes, I realized, this took place. You actually filmed this a couple of years ago. So now these 18-year-olds or 20, 21-year-olds, is there any update of note that you want to talk about with some of the kids? Good, bad, or otherwise?
Well,
Yeah.
they can now get into bars, which is scary.
They are still cool as shit and going about their lives. I mean, each one of their stories is distinct. I think the movie is very much about that moment in time where you have that group of friends, and not everybody gets to keep that. And I think it kind of, you find your own way, like an exploding universe, and you're lucky if you get to maintain some of those relationships. So I think each of them really has a very unique story at the moment. Mostly they're trying to stay employed and pay the rent, and that looks different for each of them.
Doing normal 21-year-old type stuff, except going to the Venice Film Festival and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It comes out on Mubi at the end of the month, and until then we'll be traveling around with it. So hoping that people will engage with it.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Chuck.
Bill and Turner, for being on West Dock. It was really a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you guys the best.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
having us.